Good morning. So, the 0.3 update announcement is here. We have the patch notes, and this video here will be a very quick breakdown on what we have gotten in these just now. Like I said, this video here will be a very quick breakdown and summary of the patch notes. If you want a more detailed look at them, check out the link in the description of this video. Kalturek, Miso, and I did a full podcast episode immediately after the announcement yesterday, breaking down and discussing the full patch notes in more detail. So if this video is not going into enough detail for you, I advise you to check out that portion of the podcast that we did yesterday that will be linked in the description underneath this video. So, patch notes for the 0.3 update, the third edict. Let's start off with the support gems. Support gems removed the restrictions of just having one per character. So instead of just having one martial tempo, for example, on lightning arrow or any other skills, you can have martial tempo on basically every single skill now that you are able to slot it in. Just martial tempo as an example here. No more locking in just one support gem per character. We also have multiple tiers of support gems now, so there are different tiers now. The first, let's take martial tempo again as an example. Tier 1 martial tempo might just have some attack speed base. Tier 2 might have more attack speed base, and then Tier 3 might have an additional effect, for example. It might have more attack speed, and then an additional effect like some added damage or whatever. There are multiple different ways of doing it here. We have seen quite a few of them. So basically the tiers 1 and 2 and then 3 always gets like an extra effect. We also get 11 new support gems overall, and we have the new lineage support gems as well. The lineage support gems are looking extremely potent and really good. Seems to be build defining in some ways. I think it's 40 of them. They released 40 of those. Some of them look absolutely insane. I just remember from the top of my head the one with +1 to all skills and stuff. So lineage support gems, this introduction will be huge for builds and just build defining characters overall. So new content and features. New skill gems as well, not just new support gems, but also new skill gems as well. New keystone passive skills on the passive tree. We have added a greater and perfect currency orb with minimum modifier levels. This is a huge change to crafting already. I will get into some more crafting stuff in a bit here with the essences rework, but now we have not only the normal transmutation orb, for example, or the normal chaos orb, we now have the base chaos orb. We have also perfect chaos orbs, for example, now. And those can guarantee a minimum level of a modifier on items, which is going to be huge for crafting and determinism when it comes to actually crafting your own gear. We also have 10 new uniques, 50 new base item types, 20 new endgame maps, and 15 new omens. Other than that, endgame changes. We now have access to pinnacle content in splinters, so it's much easier to access the pinnacle content earlier in the endgame now, as opposed to just having a breachstone, for example, and you have to farm the full breachstone. Now it will be splinters basically, and the higher the difficulty of the pinnacle content, the more splinters you will need. So in early endgame, for example, if you want to access the tier 1 breachstone, for example, you will now need only splinters. You will not need a full breachstone. Starting off with 2 points per league mechanic tree is also a change that they introduced here. So now we already have 2 points to be allocated in the league mechanic trees, like Delirium, like Ritual, like Breaches from the start. Arbiter now has a static difficulty, 2 static difficulties with infinite tries, and now we also have an Uber Arbiter, which is pretty similar to how we accessed the T4 Arbiter or any Arbiter before, but now we have an Uber Arbiter. How that will look, is it still the T4 Arbiter type? We don't really know. I think in the patch notes they said the Uber Arbiter will kind of reflect the old T4 arbiter. So we will have to see. It's also, I should say here, it's also much easier to access the arbiter now. Waystone modifier rework. We now not only have the system of just prefixes and suffixes, we now have them combined together basically. Every upside always has an automatic downside attached to it. For all the POE1 players, this is basically how waystones or maps in POE1 worked. In my opinion, a very, very, very nice change, because it just makes the whole like crafting of waystones much more smooth, in my opinion. And always we can always just think, oh yeah, this upside has this downside has this upside, and we can now easier craft these much easier, and it is a much more streamlined experience in my opinion. New base item types in high tier maps with, for example, 30% quality or one more socket. So if a wand, for example, can have one socket, one base item wand can usually have one socket, there is the possibility now of high tier crafting bases that you get in high tier maps that they already come with 2 sockets possible. And yes, they can be vauled for a 3rd socket. So just using wands as an example here, we can now have wands with 3 sockets, which is absolutely crazy in my opinion. So that is going to open up a new way of crafting already, and these new item bases. Okay, speaking of crafting, essences got a full rework here as well. It's also very, very similar to what it is the case in POE1 now. We have 4 tiers of essences now, and basically to do the TLDR here on the essences, we have more determinism on essences now. The way it was before, when you had an essence of defense, for example, it chose by random, or like randomly, it shows a modifier that was deterministic. Not really deterministic, but it shows a modifier based on the like defensive type. So it could be everything. It could have been energy shield, it could have been maximum life, whatever. Now, on the essences, we have guaranteed modifiers. So if you use an essence, you will know what you get on the item when you use them. So not only do we have 4 tiers of essences now, so we can modify white items to blue items to rare items, but now we can guarantee a mod in essences. Also, on top of that, the perfect essences remove a random modifier and add a guaranteed modifier. So also more determinism here, and just overall a huge thing for essences. This is gonna be very, very baseline for a lot of people, I think. Not only the high tier crafting will have this, but also it will probably be already introduced in the campaign, and we can already have a lot more deterministic approaches to how we are crafting and how we are guaranteeing certain modifiers on items. This is one of those things I'm most excited for in this update. It is just awesome. Let's just say during the campaign or whatever, you find a pretty nice bow when you're playing a bow build through campaign, but it's just missing that one thing. You can now actually guarantee a certain modifier with these essences. So player changes here. First thing is going to be sprinting. We now have the ability to sprint with our characters. It works in a way that when you press your spacebar, basically, or whatever your dodge roll button is, instead of only dodge rolling now, if you keep it pressed, you will now start sprinting after that dodge roll. It has a downside though. When you get hit while sprinting by any monster or whatever, you will be knocked down. So, pretty similar to the roar mechanic. So I'm not sure about this one. I think it will be very, very nice for stuff like backtracking when you have cleared the map already, for example, and you need to go all the way up to a missing rare, or you've left some loot in another area. I think this will have some good implications for a campaign and these situations that I just described in mapping or whatever. Overall, I think this is... it seems a little bit like a band-aid fix for now, but I think it will still have some positives. I think a lot of people are memeing on it now, but I think there are definitely some positives here when it comes to sprinting. So also some player changes, no more multiple skill gems socketed. So you cannot have multiple skill gems socketed anymore. For example, one example I had, I don't know if this is also the case for cast-ons, for example, but multiple arcs or multiple skills of the same type in your character is not possible anymore. They've also reduced the attribute requirements on all equipment items. This includes skill gems, items, everything. So reduced attributes requirements all across the board. Big positive change in my opinion as well. This is something a lot of players complained about, that just inhabited build making and everything. So now we don't need as many attributes anymore. Block is not limited to strikes and projectiles anymore. More stuff can be blocked now. This is made obvious by the fact that the monsters are now glowing red, I think. All the slams basically from all the bosses and stuff can be blocked now. Also, big change. In comparison, or like in reaction to that, max block is now reduced from 75% to 50%. Minions always hit with attacks now. No more need for accuracy rating on minions. No more movement penalty for reloading your crossbow is also a big change I decided to include in this TLDR here. This is huge for crossbows. So, Ascendancies, I'm not going to go, like I said, into all the details, what is going to be changing about the Ascendancies. Like I said, if you want the full details, check out the podcast episode of us breaking down all the patch notes in like 1.5 hours. We broke down everything in that podcast episode. So Warbringer overall got a rework with a totem focus. In my opinion, seems like an overall buff. So Warbringer now a little bit more totem based because of the block rework as well. There were some stuff changes. I think overall it's a buff to Warbringer. Smith of Kitava on the other side got a nerf. However, that might play out in the end is yet to be seen. I still think Smith of Kitava is not like nerfed overall, like heavily or whatever. It's still probably one of the strongest, especially defensively looked on ascendancies in the game. I did perceive the changes to Smith of Kitava as a slight nerf though. Gemling got a small rework since we now all have the Gemling ability of being able to slot multiple skill gems, support gems in our characters. The Gemling got a small rework. You now get some bonuses dependent on which support gems you have socketed into all of your skills. Tactician got pinning nerfed. I think Tactician got a little bit not enough love here. Tactician was something that was not very heavily played before this patch. All the stuff that was changed in the Tactician I perceived to be even a slight nerf. I didn't really like what I was reading there. I don't think Tactician really got the love it deserved here. So Tactician, I'm gonna leave here. Maybe you can correct me in the comments how I understood the Tactician changes here. I didn't really see that is going to be enough to make the Tactician more played in 0.3 patch. Deadeye got probably the biggest nerf here. I think this is well deserved though. We got a nerf to avidity here. Now has 50% chance to gain an additional frenzy charge as opposed to gaining maximum possible frenzy charges. This is to not have Wind Serpent's Fury one shot every single pinnacle boss anymore. I think this was something that most people expected. No nerfs to Tailwind though. So Deadeye still has Tailwind, one of the strongest Ascendancy nodes in the game in my opinion still. So Invoker got a slight buff to Meditate and Elemental Expression. Yeah, unexpected to be honest. I think Meditate was already pretty strong, is even stronger now. Invoker stands tall as one of the strongest Ascendancies in the game as well. Acolyte of Chalupa got a big rework. I am not an expert on the Acolyte of Chalupa. Maybe in the comments as well you can tell me. All the experts on Chalupa here, you can maybe tell me in the comments if this was a perceived nerf, buff, is it good, the update? I couldn't really tell. I saw some people in the comments yesterday when we were breaking this down that they think it's not hitting the mark here for the Chalupa. So yeah, it's yet to be seen. Blood Mage, we now have the 2 first Ascendancy points free. So the Sanguine Mancy that we had to spend Ascendancy points before is now free. That is a big buff, in my opinion. On the other side here, we got a slight nerf to Gore Spike. It is not a 50% anymore, but now a 40%. So Armor Ignore got also nerfed. That Ascendancy node got yeeted basically completely. You now get some flask changes. You get like more flask charges or whatever, as opposed to having physical damage ignore monster armor, which is a big nerf to the Blood Mage bleed build. So Infernalist, slight buff. Lich, buffed. Chronomancer got a buff as well. Quicksand Hour now has 1 to 60% cast speed and 1 to 60% AoE. And how it works now is you start off with 1% and then it cascades up to 60% and down to 1% and up to 60% again. I think this Ascendancy node might be the biggest biggest buff, in terms of Ascendancy nodes in this patch here. I have to see it in game. This sounds crazy. This is in the median. If you go 1 to 60 and it cascades between 1 and 60 all the time, it goes up and down and up and down. In my logic, in my brain, that means in the median sense, we always have 30% more cast speed and 30% more AoE with this Ascendancy node on the Chronomancer. Huge in my opinion. Again, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I'm very bad at math. Is that how it works? I don't know. Okay, next one. Stormweaver got some buffs. I forgot the name already. The Whirlwinds got a lesser cooldown, and we just have some overall slight buffs to Stormweaver again. Most of the buffs to Stormweaver and just caster classes in general will be in the skill changes and in the overall changes, for example, mana. I will get into that. On the passive tree, we have new clusters, new notables. Giant's Blood got a nerf, Eternal Youth got a nerf, Glancing Blows got a rework, since we now have like a big rework, or not a big rework, but some changes to how block functions. So Glancing Blows kind of got nerfed, reworked, however you want to call that, and a Resolute technique got changed as well. The way it is right now, melee builds will now have a baseline much higher chance to actually hit opponents. You don't need as much accuracy rating anymore, so Resolute technique got changed into doubling your accuracy rating as opposed to you always hit. You basically will always hit now with some accuracy rating, so Resolute technique didn't need to be in the old way. I think the nerfs to Giant's Blood, Eternal Youth, and Glancing Blows here to be expected. I think Eternal Youth was one of the most used keystones in the last update, so I think it was kind of expected. And also Giant's Blood was kind of mandatory when you actually wanted to do some damage with two-handed maces. So yeah, about to be seen. What I should mention here as well is we are getting so many new clusters. We have over 100 new notables on the passive tree, so there will be ample opportunity to find new stuff here. This is just like 3 changes or 4 changes to some keystones and some notables here. We are getting so many more, and as soon as we know how the passive tree looks after that, we can start the recrafting on those. So skills. There is so many skill changes in this. I decided to not go over that one by one to not make this video artificially longer. Like I said again, check out the podcast section for everything broken down in very broad and detailed terms. Overall, skills, base damage scaling got improved. That is the gem level scaling that got improved a little bit. It is something that a lot of people were asking for, how it will look in game and how it is functioning in game. It is yet to see because we only see the numbers, but how they worded it is that it is just much more smooth now, and the linear expression is much better now. So mana cost rebalance is something that I just talked about, what I perceive to be a big buff for all the caster stuff, of course, because how it sounded in the patch notes is there is a lot less mana cost to a lot of skills, and the scaling is not as harsh anymore. So if you go higher on certain skills that require a lot of mana to cast, when you get up to the level 30, level 35 level, it is now much less, and the mana cost is just rebalanced in a way that you can cast much more now, which I really like. As a Stormweaver main in 0.1, I will be happy to maybe go back into some Stormweaver action with that. So no more blink, convalescence, or sacrifice offerings on weapon swap. That was something that was kind of used, I think, in every single build that used energy shield. Convalescence was used on weapon swap in every single build that used energy shield. Blink was basically used in any single build that you could pick it up on. No more weapon swap blinking, no more weapon swap convalescence, and no more weapon swap getting soul offering, for example. I don't really like it. I always really liked having blink as an option in the second weapon set and always being able to include blink in most of the builds. I personally don't really like it. I get where they're coming from. It was basically mandatory, but having used that for a while now, it will be rough to get used to that. Spectres now cost less spirit as well. Overall, we get a lot of new Spectres as well, and they've said in the announcement that Spectres got huge love here. So Spectres, Companions now cost less spirit. Cast on Freeze, Cast on Shock, and Cast on Ignite are gone, and it's now just one meta skill gem called Cast on Elemental Ailment. I think that is awesome, especially for spellcasters. How they introduce a lot of the things for spellcasters is that you are not locked into one element anymore. All the elements now apply elemental exposure. Everything can be combined now. You are not just a lightning caster anymore. You are not just a frozen caster anymore. You can now combine everything, with infusions. And now this goes into the Cast on Freeze, Cast on Shock, Cast on Ignite with Cast on Elemental Ailment. I think for casters, that is a big and huge positive. Caster archetype skills, lots of buffs overall, lots of reworks. Like I just said, we now have no more single element exposure. Now we just have elemental weakness. So whether you are casting lightning spells, casting fire spells, whatever, you just apply elemental weakness now. So you can easily combine everything now as a caster. You can do lightning with frost. You can do lightning with fire, frost with ice or whatever, and now you just apply elemental weakness. With that comes also the new thing of having infusions. So basically how that will work is when you cast a certain skill, for example, a lightning skill, you will have an infusion for a frost skill, for example. The best example I can give now is when you cast Spark, in combination with frost skills, you gain an infusion for Spark, a frost infusion for Spark, which makes you shoot out basically the wild shards of Spark all around you in a circle, and you pick up another infusion, and then you can keep casting those. Looked absolutely amazing in the announcement stream. I am super, super excited for all the caster stuff that we are about to get in the next update. Crossbow skills got a lot of reworks, a lot of buffs. They put a lot of effort into changing crossbow skills again. There were a few where I wasn't really sure if that's a buff or a nerf, like a rapid shot, galvanic shards, and all of that. But overall, it seemed like they have put a lot of emphasis on buffing and improving crossbow skills overall. Two-handed maces, also same vein here. They removed a lot of the attack speed penalties to two-handed mace skills. The best example I can give you now is Sunder, for example. Sunder not anymore has +1 attack time, for example, but now scales off your attack speed on a lower scaling, basically. So a lot of the clunkiness on the two-handed mace skills seems to be going away, which is also something that a lot of people were asking for, and I understand that, and that is a very good thing. Minion buffs across the board as well. That is something that was very, very apparent in the skill changes as well. Minions are buffed all across the board. Unique changes. Tangle Tongue got nerfed. I think the nerf to Tangle Tongue will still be in a way that Tangle Tongue is still going to be a good item. It got nerfed. Probably the most obvious prediction that most of people had before this patch. So Tangle Tongue nerfed. Also nerfed, very slight nerf to Death Sarp, and very slight nerf to Maligoros as well. Item changes. Overall, the only thing I have written down here in the TLDR here was crit nerfs. I don't really see it as a nerf per se. I just think that they want more stuff other than crit to be viable. So they buffed a lot of stuff on the baseline, so they lifted up the ground on a lot of stuff. and crit got slightly cut off the top a little bit. So we are not going to get as much crit anymore on the items we are getting. I fully expect a lot of the nodes on the passive tree to be changed when it comes to crit. We are not going to be able to stack as much crit anymore. I think this is a good change because I think this opens up the game a lot more when it comes to crit in the game, and when it comes to damage scaling in the game. We are not as reliable on crit as the only damage scaler anymore. But overall, most people will say big nerfs to crit. What I forgot here is deepest tower gone. Deepest tower is gone for now. That was an option that most people always look for when it came to damage scaling that wasn't crit based. Deepest tower is gone for now. It will come back. They said they are gonna rework the deepest tower, so that one is gone. Okay, that is going to be it. As for the TLDR here for these patch notes, this went way longer than I expected already. I wanted to keep this as short as possible. I didn't want to just read you all the patch notes. Everyone can do that. I just wanted to do a very, very quick TLDR. I will say one more time, if you want a more detailed breakdown, check out our latest podcast episode that we did right after the announcement. We reacted to the announcement, and then right after we did a podcast episode. So if you want to see all of that being broken down in a more detailed fashion, check out our podcast episode that is linked in the description. Also, I am streaming this game every single day. The next days until the 0.3 release will only be theory crafting on my stream. I will be doing league starter builds. I will be doing theory crafting on possible league starters. I will be doing theory crafting on whatever there may be when it comes to how to best prepare for the 0.3 launch here. So if you want to join on that on my Twitch stream or on my YouTube here, be on the lookout. Best way is always to check out my Twitch stream. I'm streaming on Twitch every single day, and like I said, next few days is gonna be league starter time, getting ready, setting up league starters, theory crafting about that. So yeah, check out my stream. Okay, that's it. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one. Love you. Bye.